Hello and welcome to lesson 4.3. Today we're going to look at solving two-step equations. And we're going to start right out with an example. So example 1 wants us to solve negative 3x plus 5 equals 2. The difference between this and what we've been solving is notice now we have an additional piece. Okay, before we would have had like negative 3x equals 2, okay, or x plus 5 equals 2. Now we have two operations that are being attached to this x. We have an addition of 5 and a multiplication of a negative 3. So we have to, there is a correct order in which we have to undo these. So what I like to do is I like to kind of box off the variable and whatever coefficients attached to it. And then what I have to do is we're going to have to get rid of that other term. So in this case, I can see that I'm adding 5. So to undo that 5, I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides. And when I do that, these 5s are going to cancel, and I'm left with a negative 3x equals 2 minus 5 is a negative 3. So now I can see that I'm right back to an equation that we just got done spending a couple days solving, and I have negative 3x, or negative 3 times x equals a negative 3. So to undo that multiplication, now I can go ahead and come in and divide both sides by negative 3. I can see that these are going to cancel, and I'm going to be left with x equals negative divided by negative is a positive, and 3 divided by 3 is 1. So I get x equals negative 1. Now you can always go back and double check your work. Remember, if I plug that 1 in, so if I go negative 3 and I plug that 1 in for that x and add 5 to it, this is going to give me a negative 3 plus 5, and negative 3 plus 5 is 2, and that's exactly what they had in my original problem. Please pause the video, work these out on your own, and then come back and double check to see that you got it correct. So for number 1, I see that I have 2x plus 12 equals 4. I'm going to just put a little box around 2 and x because those two are attached directly. And then I can see that I'm adding 12 to that box. I need to undo the addition of 12, and I'm going to do that by subtracting 12 from both sides. So now my positive and negative 12s are going to cancel. I have 2x equals, and 4 minus 12 is going to give me a negative 8. Now I need to get rid of that 2 that's attached to the x. That's really 2 times x. So I'm going to divide to undo the multiplication. My 2's are going to cancel, and I'm going to be left with x equals a negative 4. And again, you can always plug that back in and double check your work. For number 2, I have negative 5c right here. So I need to undo that addition of 9 by subtracting 9 from both sides. My 9's are going to cancel, leaving me with a negative 5c. And I now have a negative 16 minus 9. Remember, negative 16 minus 9 is really the same thing as adding another negative. So that means I really have a negative 25 here. Now I have negative 5c equals negative 25. Negative 5 is attached to c by multiplication, so I can go ahead and divide everything by a negative 5. And I can see that I'm going to end up with c equals negative divided by a negative is a positive. 25 divided by 5 is a 5. So c then is a positive 5. And finally, with number 3, I have 3x. I'm going to kind of section off by itself. From that, we're subtracting 12. To undo that subtraction, I'm going to add 12 to both sides. These are going to cancel, and 9 plus 12 will give me 21. I'm left with the 3x here on the right. And to undo that multiplication of 3 and x, I'm going to divide both sides by 3. And I'm left with x then equals 7. So you can either write it like that, or those of you that like to write your variable first, you can write that as x equals 7. Either way, I don't care. Now let's take a look at example 2. For example 2, we have x divided by 8 minus 1/2 equals a negative 7/2. So again, I'm going to start out by blocking off the x divided by 8. And now I can see that I'm really subtracting 1/2 from that. So to undo subtraction, I'm going to go ahead and add 1/2 to both sides. And that is addition that's not coming through there. So my 1/2s are going to cancel here, and that's going to leave me with x divided by 8 equals a negative 7/2 plus 1/2 will actually give me a negative 6/2. So if I take this one more step, I really have x divided by 8 equals a negative 3. And now I have to get x by itself because I was told to solve. So this is x divided by 8. So to undo that 8, I'm going to multiply both sides by 8. And when I do that, my 8s will cancel here, leaving me with just x. And negative 3 times 8 is a negative 24. And again, you can always double check your work. If I plug in a negative 24 in for x, and I divide that by 8 and subtract 1/2, this is going to give me negative 3 minus 1/2. And if I put that in terms of halves, that's really negative 6/2 minus 1/2. Then I'm going to end up with a negative 7/2. And that's exactly what we started with right up here. So again, please pause the video, try this example, and then come back and double check your work. Now for number 4, I'm going to kind of box off the m divided by 2. I can see that I'm adding 6 to that, so I want to subtract 6 from both sides. And when I do that, that's going to leave me with m divided by 2 equals 4. Now I need to get m by itself, and m divided by 2, to undo that division, I have to multiply both sides by 2. So that's going to leave me with m equals 8. Likewise, when I go to number 5, I'm going to kind of section off that negative z divided by 3. I need to undo the addition of 5 by subtracting 5 from both sides. When I do that, I'm left with a negative z divided by 3 equals 4. And to undo the division of a negative 3, I'm going to multiply by both sides by a negative 3. So multiply by a negative 3. My negative 3's are going to cancel, and I'll be left with z equals a negative 12. And then for number 6, my 4a is the part that I'm going to kind of section off. I have 2/5 that's being added to that, so I need to subtract 2/5 from both sides. When I do that, I'm left with 4a equals a negative 6 minus 2 is actually going to give me a negative 8/5. And now I have to divide both sides by 4 because that's really 4 times a. So if I divide by 4, I also have to divide this side by 4. These are going to cancel, and that's going to leave me with a equals. Now I have a fraction, or I'm dividing fractions, so I have negative 8/5. And I'm going to change flip. So I keep my negative 8/5, change my sign from division to multiplication, and flip that 4 and turn it into 1 divided by 4. So now when I multiply this out, I have negative 8 times 1, which is a negative 8. 5 times 4 is 20, and a negative 8/20 is going to cancel down or reduce down to a negative 2/5. So this would be my final answer. Next, we have example 3. And for part A, it says to solve 3y minus 8y equals 25. Now here, the nice thing about this is both of these, the 3y term and the 8y term, they're like terms. So I'm going to suggest that you, in order to solve for y, that you combine these first. So 3y minus 8y is going to give me a negative 5y. So I have negative 5y equals 25. So now what I can do is, in order to solve or to get y by itself, I have to undo that negative 5. Well, negative 5 is being multiplied by y. So I'm going to go ahead and divide both sides by a negative 5. And I'm going to be left with y equals a negative 5. So the big thing on this one is that you had to combine your like terms. Same thing with part B. I see that I have negative 6 equals 1/4 w minus 1/2 w. The very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to combine those two terms. So I have 1/4 minus 1/2. I need to get a common denominator. So I have 1/4 w minus 1/2 is really 2/4 w. And this is all equal to negative 6. So when I simplify this now, 1/4 minus 2/4 is really a negative 1/4 w. And now I need to undo that 1/4, or negative 1/4 rather, from the w. And I'm going to do that. You can divide both sides by a negative 1/4, or if you remember from before, we can also multiply by the reciprocal of that negative 1/4. So if I multiply by a negative 4/1 on both sides, I end up with a negative 4 times a negative 6, which is a positive 24, equals my 1/4 and 4 are going to cancel, and that's going to leave me with w. So w is going to equal a positive 24. Please pause the video and try these on your own. Okay, for number 7, I'm going to combine my like terms, and I'm left with a negative 2y plus 7 equals a negative 9. I'm going to go ahead and subtract 7 from both sides because I need to get this 2y by itself. So when I subtract 7, I'm left with a negative 2y equals a negative 16. Then I can divide both sides by a negative 2. And y then is going to equal a positive 8. Number 8, I can combine 7x and negative 10x. That gives me a negative 3x equals 15. I can go ahead and divide both sides by a negative 3. And then I'm left with x equals a negative 5. And on number 9, again, I can combine my decimals here, and I'm left with negative 8 equals 1.3 minus 2.1 will give me 0.8 m. And sorry, that's a negative 0.8. Now when I go ahead and divide both sides by a negative 0.8, these are going to cancel, and I'll have m by itself, and negative 8 divided by a negative 0.8 is really going to give me a positive 10, and that's my final answer there. Now for your favorite part, example 4 is our story problem. So example 4 says, you install 500 feet of invisible fencing along the perimeter of a rectangular yard. the width of the yard is 100 feet. We want to know what is the length of the yard. So you can see right here in the drawing, our perimeter is going to be 500 feet. Okay, I know that one length or the width rather, is 100 feet, but I don't know what my two lengths are. But I do have enough information right now that I can start plugging in things that I know. So the perimeter equation, if you recall, is going to be length plus width plus length plus width. And if you collect your like terms, that's really 2 lengths plus 2 widths. And based on the information that you're given, you are told that your perimeter is 500. You don't know what your length is, but you know that your width is 100. So I can plug in all that information based on what was given. So if I simplify this, I really have 500 is equal to twice my length plus 200. Now we can go ahead and start working on getting length by itself. So I kind of want to keep this as a separate piece right now. I'm going to subtract 200 from both sides. And I can see that I end up with 300 is equal to 2L. To get L by itself now, I'm going to have to divide both sides by 2. And I can see then that my length is actually going to be 150, and my unit was given in feet. So each one of those sides are 150 feet long. Please try this example on your own before you watch the solution. Okay, so here we're told that a taxi charges $2.50 plus $2 for every mile traveled. We need to find the number of miles of traveled for a fare that was $10.50. So what I'm doing is I'm essentially looking at the cost. So I know that my cost is equal to, now that $2.50, you're going to pay that whether you go 1 mile or 100 miles. So we're going to go $2.50, and then we're going to add that to our charge of $2 for every mile traveled. So I need to put in a variable with this because I don't know how many miles I've traveled yet. So, but I know I have to pay $2 for every mile. So I'm going to go 2M. They did tell me that my cost was $10.50, so I can plug that in for C. So I have $10.50 equals $2.50 plus 2M. So now I need to go start working on getting that M by itself. So I can subtract 250 from both sides. And when I do that, I now get $8 equals 2M. If I divide both sides by 2, I now get M is equal to 4. And remember, we're looking at miles traveled, so this would become 4 miles. Please let me know if you guys have any questions. Otherwise, have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow.